Hello again, and welcome to the All Portable Discussion Zone, a biweekly live stream all about amateur radio portable ops. My name is Charlie. The call sign is November Juliet 7 Victor, and I am pleased today to introduce to you tonight's guest, Walt W0CP. Hey, Walt.
Hello, Charlie. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. Also, a warm welcome to all of those who are watching in the chat room. If you have a comment or a question, go ahead and throw it in the chat feed and we'll be sure to respond the best we can. I am without my two co-hosts this evening. They're doing other things, and so I'll have to man the chat questions as well as everything else, which can be challenging, but we'll get her done, I think. Don't forget, this is a podcast and is converted over to a podcast about 24 hours after the show's release. And so with that, let me just go ahead and get you guys updated on what is going on. Before I do that, let me just acknowledge you got K6ARK in the chat, along with Doug and Roger and Jim, some good friends in there. So thank you guys for joining. So for me, last Friday, I did a Summits on the Air activation. And this was an activation out in kind of north of Mesa, the North Mesa area. And it was in the National Forest, St. Clair Peak. It was one that I had not done before. It turned out to be relatively easy. They opened it up to off-road vehicles recently, and so I bought a permit and was able to drive to about half a mile, maybe a little more from the summit. But it was a steep summit. Got on top and was trying a new radio, a handheld, and didn't quite have a whole lot of success with that. It was kind of interesting, but was able to get my contacts. Band conditions were not the greatest, but it was one thing that I did see up there was a lot of flies. I mean, it was absolutely crazy up there. I think I have a video, in fact, I want to share with you guys because these flies drove me off of the mountain here. Let me do a present here, share screen, and let's see where it is. There it is, and share audio. There we go. So here we are. So I think you can see all the flies as I was up there. Check that out.
I'm not sure if you can tell with this camera. You can see all the bugs, but it's absolutely insane how many bugs are up here. I am gonna get down because it's just too much.
Too much bugs. So anyway, we'll be talking about this other thing that I have up here in just a minute. But anyway, had a great time up there. It just was a lot of bugs and a few contacts. And then, of course, something interesting up there. We always find something interesting on every summit I go on. Seems like there's something new or different. Well, there were some Pueblo ruins up there, and you could tell there was several rooms, and there was a big wall, and it was really quite interesting. And so I came back and I did some research, and I found that actually the mountain right next to it is called St. Clair Mountain, and they actually had an excavation there and found some skeletal remains and some jewelry and some pottery and all kinds of stuff, and 90 rooms of the Pueblo dwelling. So it was quite an interesting, historic, I suppose, activation. So that's kind of what I've been up to. Just did that Summits on the Air activation. I'm also preparing for Dayton Hamvention 2024. I'll be out there, and so for those of you who are watching who are SOTA enthusiasts, I'll be giving a presentation with K7ARK Keith and Brian, W7JET. The three of us will be out there. We'll do a SOTA presentation. And that presentation, from my understanding, is going to be streamed and available. If not live, it'll be available after Hamvention. So we'll give you more information on that once we're done there. Okay, so Walt, what have you been up to the last little bit, huh?
Oh, boy. Well, I just finished a special event station, K4 Alpha, which was celebrating the World Amateur Radio Days, which is the anniversary of the IARU, the International Amateur Radio Union, which is the club of national societies. And it's our organization that interfaces with the ITU. So last year we did a special event with the UN, HS4A, Human Security for All, and picked the call sign K4A. And this year we did it again last year we did about 50,000 Qs. So
Oh
had
my
a lot
gosh.
of QSOs.
Yeah.
This year about a little bit fewer than that, but still a lot of QSOs.
That's amazing. So that's
A lot of
and
fun.
how long had you been doing that? As a couple of years?
Just last year was the first time that we ever did that. I approached the IARU and asked them if they'd be interested in theming the anniversary of the IARU around a UN campaign that I was involved in called Human Security for All. And they said, yes, let's do it. So we got the ITU involved because they are actually the oldest UN agency, the International Telecommunications Union, which is the body that actually sets the frequency allocations for the world.
Wow.
So many hams think that the FCC is the one that actually gives us our frequency allocations. Not so. It actually comes from the ITU.
Right.
The FCC decides band segments and things like that. But when we get a new band, it's because the ITU agreed to it. And it's funny because the FCC isn't even a part of the ITU. It's the State Department. So the State Department represents hams at the ITU on behalf of the U.S. and the IARU, which is comprised of hams from all over the world, but the secretariat is at the ARRL. They influence a lot of the policies that are advocated by the State Department. So it's a really interesting dynamic. A lot more nuanced than a lot of hams realize, and the ARRL plays a really important role in our spectrum allocations.
Yeah, that's interesting. It is. I didn't even know that. There's several pieces, several nuggets in there I didn't even realize. I didn't even know that they were the longest global agency, or
the first, the oldest agency in the United Nations, the ITU, International Telecommunications Union. And that's because everybody's been fighting over spectrum since
Marconi.
since it was discovered, since Highbury Hertz sent a signal across a room wirelessly. And I stumbled across ham radio as a kid, and I've been playing the distance game ever since.
Yeah.
Let's like Marconi did. He took Heinrich Hertz's discovery that he could send a signal across the room, and he said, well, let's see if we can do it 100 yards, and then let's see if we can do it a mile. And he just kept going from there and became the most famous man in the world at one point.
Famous. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, so you guys who are just joining us, if you have not could not tell, Walt is quite an accomplished person. Just by hearing him this little bit before we've gotten going here, he's had a lot of great accomplishments. This UN thing was just one of them. Go check out his QRZ page, and you'll be amazed at what he's done. Some of the other things of note is you were the ARRL director for a while, right?
I was for 10 years. Yes, I was on the board. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and then in addition to that, you've participated in several DXpeditions, or at least one I know of.
Yeah, I've been on a few of them. Most of them have been contest expeditions where I've gone out to some rare multiplier and operated during the ARRL DX contest or the CQ Worldwide contest. Principally CW, but occasionally other modes, RTTY or sideband. But in 1993, I was invited to help organize a top 10 expedition, which was to Howland Island, which is an extremely remote island right at the intersection of the equator and the international date line. So if you look at a map, that's exactly where it is.
Wow.
And it takes forever to get there by boat. It takes a week almost to sail there. And it's completely uninhabited, administered by the Fish and Wildlife Service. It's a U.S. possession. And we put together a 10-man team and went out there and made 70,000, 60,000 QSOs from there.
How long had you been there? Were you on the island?
We were there a little bit longer than we expected because storm came up, and the island is surrounded by a coral reef, and we weren't able to leave. So we stayed a little longer. I think we were there for about 3 weeks, something like that.
Did you have
It
contingencies?
was amazing. It was an amazing experience.
Did you have contingencies in place, expecting that there was a possibility you'd stay longer than you needed to?
I think we certainly knew that we were in risky territory. You know, you get in trouble out there, there's not much anybody can do for you.
Yeah.
It's thousands of miles from Hawaii. So there's nobody out there that can rescue you if you get in trouble. And we got in trouble. So
yeah. Well,
it just added to the adventure, though. We made it out, and nobody was permanently injured. We had a few injuries, but nothing super serious. And so it turned out to be a great adventure. There's a video on it up on YouTube. AH1A was the call sign Alpha Hotel 1 Alpha. And the CQ magazine did a 2-part series on it. It was really an amazing story.
Yeah. And did you say you were the one planning it, or at least helping?
I was one of the organizers. Yeah, there were 3 of us that were organizing it, and I handled a lot of the logistics for it. The other 2 organizers took care of the licensing and some of the sponsors, but I did most of the sponsors and arranging for the equipment. I put the manifest together and purchased most of the gear that we needed to get out there.
How long do you think it took to? When do you have to start planning a DXpedition? How many?
Well, it took me about 3 weeks to complete the manifest of 3 weeks of 8-hour days. So quite a bit of work, and then all that stuff had to be shipped out to Hawaii and stored there, and then eventually loaded onto the boat. So it had to be packaged up well, and we had a few scary moments when we thought there was some essential things that we couldn't find, and we thought maybe we left some things out, but we eventually found everything. It was 4 stations on CW and 4 stations, 2 stations on CW, 2 stations on phone, on 24 hours a day for 2 weeks. Well, that's 8 operators.
Wow. So I'm sure you guys were tired by the end of it, ready to go home, weren't you?
Yeah, really tired.
Yeah, this puts this is portable operations to the max, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it really is. We had it's an uninhabited island. It doesn't have any trees, so it's very hot. 130 degrees was I think the high temperature.
Wow.
There. So really difficult conditions, but it's amazing what pileups can do for the adrenaline.
Yes.
When you get to a place like that and you wake up and you realize that there are 30,000 people that want a QSO, or 50,000 or 60,000 that want a QSO. We ended up making 60,000, but that's a lot of people who want a QSO, and it definitely gets the juices flowing.
Yeah. When was it on the sun cycle for you? Was it?
It wasn't that great. It was like the solar flux index was under 100.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And still that successful. That's great. Well.
Yeah.
It shows to show you, if you want to make a contact, there's a will, there's a way, right?
That's right. The flux is overrated. I mean, it's just it's great when we've got it, but things work when we don't have it, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Walt, that's a good introduction, but let's take you back to kind of some of your beginnings and help us to understand a little bit about your background. Maybe share with us when you got involved in amateur radio, and then also what some of your career choices were and how they may have been coincided.
Well, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 10 years old. I walked home with a friend. He said, "You want to come in my house and listen to my radio?" And I said, sure. I didn't know what he was talking about, but we went in and he started tuning around. And for some reason, my 10-year-old brain was fascinated by WWV. I think I think that this light bulb went off in my head and said, "Oh, so that's where time comes from." So I decided that was where time came from. It came from WWV, and that seemed pretty important, that we got our time from WWV. So I went home and told my parents all about that experience, and that I needed to have a shortwave radio too. So they got me one, and I started listening. Didn't have an Elmer, just listened and stumbled across hams, and managed to get my hands on a call book. There was a radio company, radio newsstand that had a call book, and somehow I got one of those and started looking up ham call signs till I found one near me and talked my mom into taking me over to his house after I called him on the phone and asked for an invitation. K5AJY in Little Rock, Arkansas was
There you go.
my first ham that I ever met.
Wow, you
And
even
he was
know that
very
off the top of your
gracious, and he had a nice shack, and so that was it. I decided I wanted to be a ham,
There you
and
go.
I knew that it had something to do with electronics, so I as soon as I could, I signed up for a summer school course in electronics. And it was really great because the course was build a radio from scratch, and build an AM radio. So you got a bucket of parts and a schematic, and you just started building this radio. Everybody had the same. There was about 15 of us in this class. I was the youngest one, and we all built a radio. And at the end of the course, we turned it on, and they worked. And I remember taking it home, giving it to my mom, and say, "Here, Mom, here's the radio for you." It was just a regular AM radio, but that was my start in electronics. That was my electronics launch.
Well, I'm still kind of stuck on, you said a bucket of parts, and I'm
Bucket
like,
of parts,
bucket
yeah.
instead of a container of parts.
Yeah,
But
yeah, some kind of a bucket full of parts.
that's funny.
So you
That's
had to
cool.
figure out what the parts were and figure out how to do the color codes, and
Right.
and just put everything together. Of course, it was point-to-point wiring back then, and you could shock yourself. It's funny though. Nobody seemed to be concerned about some kids electrocuting themselves. And
Yeah.
I came very close to it a couple of times. I remember when I first became a ham, 4 years later is when I became a ham. I still didn't have an Elmer, but I figured out how to do it. And but I've always been building and tinkering, and we had selenium rectifiers back then. And so for some reason, I can't remember why, I had to build a rectifier. And I had these selenium rectifiers, and I put them all together, wired them up backwards, and they exploded and filled my house with selenium gas, which is a poison gas. So I had to evacuate my family from the house. And that was the first of many of my electronics hijinks that resulted in some kind of either evacuation or fire or near electrocution or something like that. It was always exciting.
Wow, you're a true ham, man. A true ham.
So I was very lucky when I went to high school. There was a 2-year electronics program for people who were not going to go on to college, because electronics was turning into a major field where you could actually, I was like plumber, right? You could become an electronics technician, and TVs required a lot of electronics technicians, particularly TVs. So I decided to do that. I decided to take electronics for 2 hours a day, and I talked to a couple of my college-bound buddies, including a woman, Peggy Hurt, who went on to become an MD, but she came with us, and we all enrolled in the electronics program. We took 2 hours of electronics every day for 2 years, and it was great. It was we had a big we all sat around a big table on benches, big high table, and worked on projects, built things, We had a wonderful instructor who was
Wow.
extremely knowledgeable. So from there to extra wasn't very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, had you learned Morse code?
Yeah, Morse code was, of course, an entry-level requirement in 1963 when I got my ticket. And I loved Morse code from the beginning. I used to come home from school and get on the air, and I ran 60 watts to a dipole in my backyard, and I'd listen for DX every afternoon. My best DX was Somalia. I
Oh, wow.
worked Somalia, and when I submitted that card for a DXCC, the DXCC desk at ARRL actually sent a note back saying, "Wow."
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I don't think I've ever. Yeah, that is impressive. Especially, where were you then? What part of
I
the
was in
country?
St. Louis, Missouri then.
Oh, wow, that's quite the challenge then
Yeah.
from there. Yeah, cool. Well, so do you recall how you learned Morse code, or what method you used, or if you just kind of?
Yeah, I had a neighbor across the street, a really close friend of mine, and we would do anything for one another. And he wasn't really interested in ham radio, but I told him that I needed to learn the Morse code, and I asked him if he would send it to me. So
Oh,
he had a cheat sheet, of all the letters, and he would send me the Morse code, and I'd copy it down, and it was random letter groups is the way they taught it back then. And then I used to listen to W1AW. So when I practiced sending, I would try to send exactly like W1AW sent.
yeah,
And
genius. That's
that
cool.
was that was my goal, was to make my sending indistinguishable from W1AW. I'm not sure I ever came very close to that, but that was my goal anyway. Um,
There you
and
go.
yeah, I only did CW, and I didn't get I had low power QRP, so I'm QRP RC number 1830 or something like that, 1831.
Wow, that's
I'm
low.
a very low QRP RC number, maybe one of the lowest out there.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I was into QRP very early, and I had very rinky-dink equipment, very low power, but I learned that I could work anybody on CW. I could work DX with CW, and that was really enthralling. My mom finally bought me for high school graduation a Swan 350, which was 350 watts and did sideband, and so that was when I strayed from the path and got on sideband for a while. But eventually, I realized that CW was my true love and went back to it.
There you go.
Now I'm almost 100% CW again.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, I love CW myself. It's a great mode for sure. Okay, well, so I was going to ask you a little bit about your business, but time is already getting away from us. But why don't you just take just a second and just take us from that point where you just left off with the learning Morse code and your 2 years of everyday classes to develop this job or this business.
Well, I decided that I wanted a career in electronics. I mean, obviously, I was head over heels for electronics at that point, and my dad worked for IBM. He was a career IBMer, and we used to talk about computers a lot. And he helped me get an internship with IBM when I graduated from high school. So that was my first real job. I don't count being a lifeguard as my first real job, because I was a lifeguard with three beautiful teenage girls, and so I didn't really consider that a job.
No,
Um,
right? Yeah.
but working for IBM was, they had you wear a suit, and I was a customer engineer working on mainframe computers then. But it was clear to me that computers were going to, even at that point, that computers were going to change the world.
Yeah.
So, but I wanted to be in broadcasting, and I enrolled in what was called a 3-2 program back then. I didn't want to be a too much of a geek. I thought I was too much. I thought I was too much of a geek anyway.
You're too cool for that.
When I graduated from high school, I thought I was just too deep into electronics and that I couldn't relate to normal people anymore. So my counselor said, well, if you want to be a normal person and maybe attract a girlfriend someday, you should join this 3-2 program, which is you go to a liberal arts school for 3 years and you learn humanities and languages and art and things like that, and math, and some science and physics, but well-rounded education.
Right.
And then you finish off 2 years of engineering at you transfer, and so she found a school that 2 schools, University of Illinois and Knox College, that had a agreement with one another. So I enrolled in that program, and it worked too well. I ended up attracting a girlfriend and getting married when I was a junior in college before I even graduated. And my wife was a year younger than me, and she became a teacher in the public school system there. So I wasn't able to move to Champaign to finish the 3-2 program.
Yeah.
And I just finished off an economics degree at Knox. And that turned out to be really a wonderful thing for me, because it taught me a little bit about money,
Yes.
about finance, about accounting. We did have a computer course in there too, a computer course or two. And then I ended up going to graduate school later and getting an MBA to finish, to focus more on the business side of things. And that turned out to be a great complement with the geekiness, the electronics training. And then when I started the company in 1972, I was 23 years old. I started doing broadcast contracting. I had an FCC first class license at that point, and you had to have one of those in order to run a transmitter at a broadcast station, commercial broadcast station. So I got one of those along the way, and I ended up doing remote broadcast work. That was my specialty. But I had I created a company to do that, and the company also started selling PA equipment and home audio equipment in 1972, and that company's still in business today. It's called Listen Up, and it's a very successful company in Colorado and New Mexico, and has a really long history. But it got started doing broadcast engineering.
There you go. Yeah. Well, that's quite the story. I'm sure there's so many more areas we could dive into, but my gosh, we're already halfway done with the interview, and we're here about SOTA. And so why don't you? And by SOTA, I mean not the drink. I'm talking about Summits on the Air, of course. So take us from there. When did you get interested in Summits on the Air? Take us to that point. How did you get involved in that and get going with Summits on the Air? Yeah.
Well, so I love DXing. You probably got that point. I eventually worked, I confirmed every country. And so I kind of lost a little bit of interest in DXing there. I've been very interested in contesting and developing skills, rate skills,
Yes.
Trying to challenge myself to work as many. I think my best SSB hour is about 300. My best CW hour is about 200. So I got my rate up pretty high, but you can't always do that, especially from the Midwest.
Right.
And
yeah.
But that's my focus. That's been my focus. Develop those skills, practice those skills. Get really good at copying high-speed CW. Get really good at rate. So what's that got to do with SOTA? Well, so I bought a house, a cabin in Buena Vista, Colorado, which is about 2 hours southwest of Denver. And I started climbing mountains out there. It's in the Collegiate Peaks area, the Arkansas Valley, headwaters of the Arkansas River. The Arkansas River ran right past my boyhood home, where I had my SWL career started, and the headwaters are right next to my house in Buena Vista. So there's a serendipity there. There's some kind of connection. But anyway, right out my window of my cabin in Buena Vista is a peak called Midland Hill. And in the valley there are more 14ers than any other part of Colorado, maybe any other part of the United States. You can see probably 10 14ers just standing in the street, looking up and down the valley. And so I started climbing. This was about 2004. So I climbed out there for about 10 years, and I climbed Midland Hill many times because it was visible right out my plate glass window, my picture window in my cabin.
Now, let me just interrupt real quick. By you mean mountain trekking, right? You're not talking about just going on a hike. This is different. There's often snow, and you need crampons and all that, right? This is different.
Well, if you haven't done a 14er, you don't know what I'm talking about. But it's different when you're starting at a mile high and you're going up from there. It's not like hiking at sea level. Some of the elevation gains that I've done, like in North Carolina, other parts of the United States that I've done SOTAs in, are very challenging physically and steep and that sort of thing. But you still have oxygen.
You still have
in Colorado, you run out of oxygen. You're starting at a mile high and you're going up from there. By the time you get up to about 12,000 feet, you're running out of oxygen. And so I did that for about 10 years, and I didn't know anything about SOTA. I took a 2-meter radio up there with me every time. My wife's a ham K0ZV. And so I would talk to her and tell her I'm okay when I would be up above timberline, and I'd have line of sight to her, of course. And so I'd always took a radio, but I didn't know anything about SOTA. So I did that about 10 years. And then some guy was renting a house across the street from me, and I was into motorcycles, and his wife was riding a motorcycle. So I walked up and started talking to her, and we became friends, and she invited her husband over to our house to sit on our porch. And turned out her husband was NN5K, Dave Fuller.
Oh yeah,
from Albuquerque, and Dave and I are sitting around and talking about ham radio, and his wife was a ham too. So a lot of hams are sitting around the table drinking beer on the patio, right? And Dave said, "That's the Midland Hill, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "You want to do a SOTA up there?" "What's a SOTA?" I didn't know what a SOTA was. He said, Well, I got some friends from Albuquerque that are hiking in the valley here, and they're going to climb Midland Hill tomorrow. You want to go up there?" And I said, "Heck yeah." They're going to have to pay me because that's my mountain. I'm going to be the troll up there. I'll collect a toll from them. And so we went up there and joined them that the next day. And it turned out to be N7UN, KT5X, K1JD, and of course NN5K and I. And a KT5X, I think, is the first mountain goat in the United States.
Yeah.
Fred Moss and John DePrimo. And of course, Guy is very prominent in the SOTA community. So that was my introduction to SOTA. I didn't have any equipment. I just hiked up the top of the mountain, and there they were.
Wow.
And Fred said, "You want to make a few cues?" And I said, "Sure." And I'm looking at this, MTR and a little wire, coming off of a fiberglass pole. And I'm thinking, this is going to be a challenge. And I get on there and call CQ with my call sign, and I had a pileup. Well,
Yes.
That's what it takes to get my juices going, is a little pileup. I'm back on a DXpedition again. I'm in the middle of a contest or something. And so I turned to Dave afterwards. I said, Dave, this is it. You know, I found my activity. I can combine my mountaineering love, my love of the outdoors, my orienteering love, which I really am keen on, my love for photography, my love of ham radio, and my love of rate, you know, and getting a little pileup going. And so I'm in heaven here. I'm going to do this. That was in 2014. And, you know, I took off, you know, I just,
That's awesome.
I wasn't chasing goat or anything, Charlie. I was just having an incredible amount of fun.
Isn't it fun though? It is awesome. It is.
Oh,
such
I
a
had
good
so
time.
much fun.
I still do. Right? I hope. Yeah, I'm sure
Oh,
you do.
it was an amazing experience getting going. And I'm mostly a solo SOTA operator. And I'm very focused on preparedness. I'm focused on, Fred is very, very keen on low weight,
Yeah.
low kilo SOTA packaging. And I learned a lot from him about that. I practiced a lot setting up so that I wouldn't get out there and have to take a lot of time. Colorado can be very challenging, and I decided to be a 12-month a year SOTA activator, which in Colorado is a real challenge.
Real challenge. Yeah.
So I realized that once I get up there, I might not want to be up there, right? If it's a blizzard or particularly if it's a blizzard, you don't want to be up there. I've been on SOTA activations where I had to crawl to the summit because there was no way you could stand up.
Wow. Yeah, I've had that one time here in Arizona, but it's just because of the wind.
It's amazing, isn't it? And in a blizzard, right? So I couldn't see and I couldn't stand up.
Yeah.
But I was determined to make an activation, and I made an activation. And I've done 313 activations, and I've never failed to make the 4 Qs, except on one activation in New Mexico, where my wife was with me, and the wind was blowing so hard that she couldn't stand up, and it was just impossible to get on the air. So
wow,
we
that's incredible.
eventually turned back from that one.
Yeah,
but
that's incredible rate right there. That's good. That's
yeah,
good.
it's sort of I wear that as a kind of a badge of honor, right? Gotta be prepared, be organized, know your equipment, don't fumble around. And Colorado is an amazing place to be a SOTA activator, and it really is incredibly challenging, but a tremendous amount of fun, and a great teacher.
Yeah, for sure. It's a tribute to your planning and preparedness to not have only just have that one there, just the wind. And pause just for a minute. I need to acknowledge somebody, and then we're going to get into some of your gear, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I just wanted to bring up here real quick and acknowledge this is a $10 donation to the channel here from Todd. Todd, really appreciate that. All the money that I get from YouTube just goes back into giving back. So I appreciate you helping us, the community, out on that. Appreciate it. All right. So I wanted to talk to you about your gear, because, you know, the title of this show today, this episode is making a great ham radio station for Summits on the Air. And so let's just start this off by asking you, what is, in your estimation, a great ham radio station?
For SOTA, I think a great ham radio station for SOTA includes an end-fed half wave. I'm a big fan of end-fed half waves. I think a lot of first-time SOTA operators waste a lot of time, waste a lot of weight, waste a lot of money on stupid antennas that they'll use Alex loops, or they'll use they'll take a chameleon, or they'll take up a dipole, or something like that, right? And I've talked to so many people in Colorado who've started out. They've started out with heavy equipment, with antennas that are very inefficient and bulky and heavy. And so I'm a big believer in in-fed half-wave antennas. And I've done a lot of, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I was just going to say you have a blog where
I have a blog. I do get into the in-fed half-wave and why I think it's the right antenna for SOTA.
Yeah. So w0cp.com. Check his out his blog. He has a lot of great SOTA tips in here. And yeah, there's one here on the NFET half-wave explains it, and he has a really nice looking one right here. So
yeah, and I've done some trap in-fed half-waves. I've gotten away. I use different antennas for different rigs, like the MTR3B, for example, which is one of my all-time favorite radios. For those of you who don't know it, it's about half the size of an iPhone, of a big iPhone, and about an inch thick. So it's really small. And I'm a big fan of that radio.
Yeah, let's just pause here real quick. K6ARK. Do you know him by the chance?
I haven't met him, no.
Adam is really an interesting guy and has a really interesting YouTube channel. And he says +1 for the NFET half-wave SOTA standard, no coax, multiband, decent performance. He's an interesting guy because his YouTube channel, he follows Fred's example. He tries to get things. He has a complete system. He just put this out on YouTube. He has a complete system, start to finish, everything, including his cell phone. He thinks is under £1 for everything.
Yeah.
And but he takes it to the other extreme. He does the Alex loops, and he does the big, big huge beams and stuff like that. He does it all, but he's just having fun. So yeah, it's a good mention.
Well, yeah, having fun is the key. But in Colorado, like I said, you run out of oxygen and pretty fast, and these mountains out here are very steep, and so pretty quickly you figure out that you don't want any excess weight.
Right.
Now POTA is something completely different. I have lots. That's where I go crazy with gear. I have for SOTA I only use a KX2 and an MTR, and I only use an in-fed half-wave, and I have some really cool telescoping poles that I've got a dozen of them that I've imported in these crappy poles. They call them freshwater fishing poles.
Yeah,
China, and they're great. So for SOTA, that's what I use, but for POTA, I go crazy. I'm not at all concerned about weight or bulk or anything, or setting up fast, or I just want to get out there and have a good time.
I'm the same as you. In fact, when I do POTA, oftentimes I'll bring a big picnic awning, and a table and a base station and 100 watts, a big 40 amp hour battery, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. POTA's a picnic, and
that's right.
And SOTA is an expedition. It's a military operation, in and out, right?
Yeah.
And it's a luxury when you can stay. In the summertime, I like to stay as long as I possibly can.
Right.
But that's KX2 I love. And so I have an antenna. I have an in-fed half-wave that I describe on my blog. That is doesn't have any traps, and I can use it on all bands. Excuse me. And so that's my antenna for the KX2.
Okay, so you mentioned
for the MTR, I use a different one. I use the trap so that it's resonant on every band.
Right.
I need it to be resonant. I need a low SWR because it doesn't have a tuner. The KX2 has the tuners. So
for the mountain topper, you're using still an in-fed half-wave, except for it's trapped.
It's an in-fed half-wave. It's trapped. And Fred and John were very helpful for me to figure out where to start in designing and building those antennas. And I've got some information on my blog about that too.
Just going to ask you.
They're a lot of fun to build if you're if you've got a workbench at home and you are handy at soldering and know a little bit about how to measure resonant frequencies and so forth, which is pretty easy today with the tools we have available. It's a lot of fun to build these antennas.
Yeah. Okay, good. So we got that it's either a KX2 or a MTR3B for you, and then if end-fed half wave is a way to go. What about your favorite paddle, or has that evolved over time, or has that always been the same?
It has evolved over time, but I hate to say this because it's unobtainium, but I'm a huge fan of the palm paddle, the Pico.
Right.
I love
Yeah.
the Pico so much. I'm lucky to have two Picos. I lost one on a summit, and I loved it so much that I actually went back a year later and found it.
Good for you.
Which is that's another thing. When you lose something on a SOTA operation in Colorado and you go back and find it, that means that you were really in love with it.
Yes, for sure. I
So
just
yeah,
saw one of those.
I use the Pico.
I just saw one of those on sale. I was actually a gray one, I think, a kind of a unusual one that was they got a good amount of money for it. So they're still around to use. I actually have one. I have two as well. I have one that I use all the time, and I have one that I bought that still hasn't even been opened out of the box yet.
Oh, that's you're.
So what can I say? I agree with you that the Pico is the way to go. Zippy,
if you ever want to sell that, I'm sure that it would get a lot of bidders on eBay.
I'm sure.
I know a lot of people are looking for those paddles, but there are a lot of, that's not the only paddle out there. And of course, it's not like photography. It's not the camera. It's the person behind the camera. It's not the paddle. It's the person sending the code. And, there are plenty of nice paddles out there. That happens to be the one that I really like the best. And I practice CW every day. I send CW every single day of my life. And I'm a real nut for CW. And I'm in these CW clubs. I'm in CW Ops, which is, if there are any aspiring SOTA operators out there who aren't into CW yet, I really recommend the SST, the slow speed CW test, which is on twice a week, and the CW Ops. Eventually, the people who in that, if they get good enough, they graduate into CW Ops. And also, I'm honored to be in FOC, the FOC CW Club.
Wow,
which
FOC.
is
that's a big deal.
What you get in when you really are declared a nutcase about CW.
Exactly.
You can be in FOC. But I love CW, and it's just I think that SOTA surprises me. It surprises me how effective CW is with low power. It surprises me when I work, when I get a lot of answers, when I call CQ with an MTR. It surprises me how well an end-fed half wave antenna works on top of a summit. It surprises me when I get to the top and I look around and I see a new vista that I never dreamed existed, Yeah. So it's just, I think these surprises in life are really what feed the soul.
Absolutely.
We are, I think us humans, we like to be surprised. We like to be amazed. And SOTA is a very amazing activity. I would put it right up there with any other activity in ham radio that I've ever done, DXpeditioning or anything. I would put SOTA right up there at the top with all that stuff.
For me, when I do summits on the air, a lot of times, I hate to admit this, but a lot of times when I'm waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning on my Friday off, and knowing that I'm going to do a SOTA op, I'm like, do I really want to do this? And every time when I'm on my drive there, I'm still kind of like in the middle. But once I get out and I start, foot to the ground and start breathing that air, it's just so exciting. And it lifts my soul every time. And I just love being out there. And so,
yeah, and I think there's something to that. I think that being in the outdoors, I think it's really good for us. First of all, the exercise we know is good for us, but I think that the whole summit experience is very enriching on some level. I can't explain it, but I hear that from everybody who's active. They're touched by it, and many of them are too embarrassed to really express how profoundly they feel it. You know, the sense of amazement they feel at actually participating in that activity. But it's there, you know, Charlie. It really is a part of it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, let me acknowledge Zippy here real quick. Seems like he's in every single show we do. He contributes something, so I really appreciate that. Again, we give back to the channel, and so whatever you give, we're going to give it back. So thank you so much. We'll make use of that and pay the bills or do a giveaway or something. Appreciate it. Let's see. We're almost at the end of this. We've only got like 9 minutes left, but I do have one more question. Maybe you can answer. Maybe you can't. We'll just see how creative you get. Do you admire or try to emulate anybody's operating style? And that doesn't necessarily even mean CW. It could mean how they set up or just anything about another SOTA op. Do you try to emulate or do you admire anybody else's style?
Well, I do. I really believe in benchmarking. That's what I do in my business life. When I'm entering a new product category, a new line of activity in the company, the first thing we do is benchmark the best, right? So I really believe in that. And when I first started my CW contesting journey, I benchmarked W0UA and N2IC. N2IC is if you look up those call signs, those you'll find out that they're in this part of the world anyway. They're considered the best, right? And and then in DXing, I got W6AM's book and read all about his life, and I tried to emulate the way he lived his life, not just his ham radio life, but his life. I took note of when he got up in the morning, what he ate for breakfast. I mean, everything.
Wow.
I just took note of it. W6AM. For those who have never heard that call sign, there was a time when the President of the United States gave a cup called the Hoover Cup, because President Hoover is the one who started handing it out, to the best ham radio station in the United States. And wow. W6AM won won that cup. He ended up becoming a very rich man because he bought a mountaintop right outside of Los Angeles, which turned out to be extremely prime real estate. He's a silent key now, but he bought a rhombic station there and had one of the loudest ham radio signals in the world.
Wow.
And then when I got into SOTA, of course, it was the call signs I've mentioned. I mean, they were my mentors, and I learned about lightweight hiking from Fred. Fred also was a marathoner on Pikes Peak and certainly understood how to stay fit and get to the top of these mountains. So absolutely. And out here in Colorado, we all look up to KX0R, and there are a lot of great SOTA activators in Colorado. We've got WG0AT out here, and everybody knows Steve, and WA6MM, mountaineers who stumbled in to ham radio. Our association manager's a mountaineer who stumbled into ham radio. So we've got some amazing mountaineers who set a tremendous example for how to behave in the mountains, how to climb, and what skills you need to stay safe. And so I think that's really important. I'm glad you brought that up. So absolutely, the answer is yes.
Yes. Thank you so much for sharing that. And some of those call signs are really, I hadn't heard of some of, like the guy with the big station in California, but some of those call signs that I actually admire those individuals as well. So that's good. All right. Well, let's wrap it up. We've got 4 minutes left. And I can't say enough how much I appreciate you coming on and letting me grill you a little bit about your feelings about summits on the air and Morse code and your background in the olden days and all that stuff, whatever it is, just getting to know you a little better. It's been a real pleasure. Let's let you take one more moment if you want. Anything else on your mind at all? Just any thoughts that you'd want to share with our listeners?
I do want to share that I really think that what you're doing here is the future of ham radio. I think as I go back and look at the arc of my ham radio life, and it's changed a lot. And the digital revolution certainly made it possible for platforms like YouTube to exist and for live streaming to exist. And it's opened doors into new vistas of ham radio that I never really dreamed I'd be interested in, and probably many of the people watching these videos have never dreamed they'd be interested in. And I think that this is really the future of ham radio. I think people have to get into it on their own and on their own terms, and they have to develop their own love for it. Nobody's going to copy the way I did it. I wouldn't want them to. We each have to find our own way, but channels like yours are really the way people are going to do that. And Bob Heil was a really good friend of mine, for example. He's a silent key, just passed away. But I want to say that Bob Heil was one of the first ones to recognize the power of the video streaming for getting people interested in new aspects, new arenas of ham radio. It's really wonderful that people like you and Bob are exposing people to all of the various dimensions, the various activities that ham radio offers. And I happen to believe very strongly that SOTA is one of the most exciting aspects.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for those kind words. I really appreciate it. I hope that we're doing some good with the live streams we do. And I appreciate you saying that. Again, I just am so impressed with all your accomplishments. You're a very accomplished individual. I wish I could interview you on several other veins of your existence, of all the things that you've done. It's just, again, guys, check out his QRZ page. You'll see some of the other activities that he's been involved in. Some of his photography is just amazing. So why don't you, Walt, let me close out here. Hang on. Don't hang up. We'll catch you on the other side. All right.
Hey, Charlie, thank you. Thank you so much for hosting this. I
All right,
really
thanks.
enjoyed it.
All right, everybody. We'll catch you in a little bit.